A Plague Tale, written by Ethan Fowler, read by yours truly. 1665. The hot morning sun floods into my room, waking me from my slumber and forcing me out of bed. I begin to dread the day to come as I get dressed in the same uniform I had on yesterday, the only protection I have against the outside world. Thick leather boots and pants to cover my legs, a long heavy coat that covers my body, and the wide-brimmed hat that old doctors wear, not to mention the big mask filled with strong herbs to protect me against the foul-smelling air of disease, all coated in a layer of animal fat for extra protection. Along with my cane, so I don't need to touch the infected, and my medical bag, I'm ready to face the nightmare that awaits me beyond the safety of my home. I spend my days going from house to house, doing all I can to help the diseased and document new cases, which grow in the hundreds each day. The symptoms change from person to person. Some go to bed feeling healthy just to never wake again. Others writhe in pain for days as they go insane from gangrene and coughing up blood before finally succumbing. Although normally there is a pattern. First, swelling, called buboes, appear normally around the armpit, neck, and groin, which grow the size of apples until turning black and popping, leaving painful sores. Then the victim's body is overcome by chills and fever. The patient can keep no food down as they slowly waste away. In some cases, it can progress so quickly that there's nothing I can do. No one truly knows how one catches such sickness. Some say touching infected one's belongings can bring on the plague, and others believe that it's sin itself, although I was taught that it's from toxic fumes or bad smells called miasmas that cause this epidemic. All we truly know is that we've had this before, and that it was delivered by what we know now as plague ships, which was filled with infected corpses. The foolish dock workers took all the infected cargo before telling the last remaining crew to set sail, but by then London was already doomed. I breathed deep, filling my lungs with the smell of herbs as I approached the last house on my long list, the moonlight lighting my way as I approached the shack-like house. I see that there is no smoke coming from the chimney, and no candlelight shining through the windows, giving me an uneasy feeling as I've seen these signs before. I step off my cart and I give an apple to my horse as I brace myself for what I'm about to see. Taking another deep breath, I walk over to the door and knock. My name is Ethan. I'm the doctor who has been given blankets from the church. May I come in? A moment passes with no answer, and my heart drops. I knock again, harder this time, hard enough for the door to give way slightly. As the hinges creak open, the scent of death escapes. The smell of herbs is strong in my mask, but not that strong. Pushing the door open, I see a sight I've seen far too often. Before me lay 5 corpses, a mother, a father, and their 3 children, all with signs of the plague. A young girl and her 2 brothers lay dead in a large bed, the mother kneeling by their side, still holding a damp cloth in the attempt to stop the children's fevers. The father on the floor next to a bucket filled with blood-stained fabric, as he had torn the little clothes he had to make bandages, none of which was for him. All was used to cover the bloody sores of his family. I noticed neither of the parents had stopped to eat, as there was an untouched meal of bread and cheese still sitting on the table. Pulling out my leather notebook, an inkwell and quill out of my bag, I note down the 5 deaths before making the cross with the other hand. There was nothing I could do for them now, other than informing the gravedigger and telling the church that there is no longer a reason to pray for their recovery. I walk to my cart and take the harness off the horse, letting him graze as I fetch him a bucket of water from the nearby well. I then carefully take off my protective cloak and crawl into the back of the cart with the blankets to sleep the night away. As the sun rises, so do I, and I get dressed and return the horse to its cart. As I do this, I begin to hear a small voice coming from behind the house, beginning to sing. Ring a rosy, a pocket full of posies, a tissue, we all fall down. Peering around the corner, I see a sleepy looking little girl walking out of the back of the house. She begins to skip as she takes small bites out of one of the two pieces of bread that was on the table before crawling into a poorly made makeshift tent. Walking over, the singing stops as her small head appears from under the tent, staring straight at me. I see her lip quiver slightly as our eyes make contact, and I brace myself for her terrified scream. Unable to hold back any longer, a large smile breaks across her face as she crawls from under her tent, bursting into laughter, tears running down her face as she holds her stomach. What's so funny? Most children scream and run away when they see me, I say, taken back from her reaction. You look like a chicken, she says, smiling from ear to ear. You're not from London, are you, kid? I say, noticing her Asian features. The laughing stops, and I notice a hint of fear in her chocolate eyes. We came over on a big boat from a place called China. The people there found out I make people sick, so Mummy and Daddy died to bring me here, she says, trying to hold back tears. Only my family can be around me, she continues, stepping away from me. If you can't make your family sick, how did your parents die? I say, kneeling down to her level. The people on the boat got sick from me, and they gave it to Mummy and Daddy, she says, wiping away more tears. And them? I say, nodding towards the shack. They took me in. I told them to stay away from me, that I would make them sick, that I could find Daddy's family all by myself, she yells, before looking to the ground sadly. But then I got lost in the scary dark forest, and I came back, saw that they had. She bursts into tears. Rushing over, I give her a huge hug. She resists at first, pushing me away until finally giving in and hugging me back as she cried. After a while, I kneel back down and wipe away the remaining tears from her face. How do you know your daddy's family's in London? I ask, looking into her crystal eyes. Mummy and Daddy gave me this, she says, turning around and taking a hand-bound book out of her tent. I flip through it, seeing both English and Chinese writing. Can you read? I ask, looking up at her. Mummy taught me Chinese, and Daddy was teaching me English, but he died before he could teach me how to read it, she says with a sad shrug. It's okay. I'll read it for you, I say, smiling under my mask. No, she yells, running behind the tent. You'll get sick and die, just like them, she says, pointing to the shack behind me. I'm safe as long as I'm in my suit, I say, standing up. Really? She says, inching from behind the tent. Is that why you're dressed as a chicken? Don't chickens get sick? She says as her smile returns with a giggle. Something like that, I respond as I gesture behind me to the horse and cart. The little girl runs over to the tent and retrieves a small bag and a handmade teddy before taking my hand and walking me over. She signals me to pick her up by raising her arms, which I do before climbing aboard myself. Where to, young miss? I say, picking up the reins. She flips through her book and finds a map with an X on the other side of London. I check my own book to see if there is any new cases of the plague in that area, and thankfully there weren't. We'll go the long way around instead of going straight through. It's safer that way, I say, tapping the horse to move on. Why must we go the long way? The little girl says, letting out a yawn. I can't get sick, and you're dressed as a chicken, she says, resting her tired head on my shoulder and hugging her teddy bear. There's more than the plague to worry about, but you get some rest, I say, stopping the horse so I can pick her up and put her in the back, tucking her in with the blankets. Nighty-night, Mr. Chicken, she whispers as she drifts off to sleep. Call me Boo, I say before returning to the reins. I ride for hours, passing plague pits and abandoned houses. There was no one in the streets other than the gravedigger going from door to door with his cart piled high with corpses. The watchers sitting outside infected houses, the door marked with a red cross. The job of the watchers was to make sure no one leaves those houses. My heart goes to those healthy family members trapped within, for their fates are all but sealed. It makes me think back to when I was younger, when the plague first hit London. My sister came home with the symptoms, and my whole family was locked up together. My parents did what they could to save her, but after a week, my 12-year-old sister had died, and one by one, all 5 of my family members followed her to the grave until there was only me. I don't remember much, only the cries of my mother every time we lost someone, and father begging the searchers to let the healthy go free, as they took all our valuables to pay the gravedigger. It was in the middle of summer when we were locked in our house, and winter when I was let out. I still don't know where they buried my family. I thought if I became a doctor, I might find their last resting place. But by the time I was taught the ways of the doctor, the plague had returned. "Morning," a young voice calls from behind me, breaking me out of my daydream. "Good afternoon, young miss. You're just in time for lunch," I say, pulling over to the side of the road next to a small church. "Morning hugs," as she hugs me from behind before climbing off the cart and hugging the horse. I pull out a few apples of my bag and step off the cart to teach little miss how to feed the horse before making my way into the church. It's better if she's not seen by the priest. The church was very cramped, only able to accommodate a dozen or so people, and smelt of wine and frankincense, making me feel uncomfortable. I keep my cane close as I make my way to one of the few priests that didn't abandon the city when the plague hit. The frail old man slowly emerges from behind the altar, a cross held tightly in his hand, as he peers over, trembling in fear. "I mean you no harm. All I want is some supplies," I say, trying to reassure him. "Do you have the plague?" the priest asks, eyeing me carefully. "I am perfectly healthy," I say, stepping closer. Stepping away from the altar, he nods behind me. "And that girl," he says, sending a chill up my spine. "What have you heard? And more importantly, who have you told?" I say in a stern voice as I take another step towards him. "Anyone that comes in contact with her dies from the plague. You should be careful, both of you. People are looking for her," he says, taking a sack out of a chest behind the altar and throwing it to me. I check inside the sack and I find food, medicine, and fresh herbs for my mask. As I walk out to the cart, I notice something that scares me to the very core. On the ground was splattered blood leading up to the church and down the road. Noticing this, I rush to the little girl, picking her up and putting her in the back of the cart, covering her with a blanket and giving her some fruit. "Why are you putting me to bed? I've just woken up," she says, hooking her head from under the blankets. "You need to stay hidden, young miss, until we get home," I say, jumping on the cart and telling the horse to walk on and then run. "Is there something wrong, Boo?" she says, concerned. "We are being hunted by a dangerous group called the Flagellants. They believe God is mad at us and that he's the one who sent the plague to punish us for our sins. They go from village to village, flogging themselves to gain God's approval," I say, scanning our surroundings to make sure we're not being followed. "What does all that have to do with us?" she says, confused. "It's the part that they torture outsiders into confessing that they started the plague by poisoning wells before burning them at the stake," I say, briefly turning around to see if she's hidden from view. I see that she's scared, holding her teddy bear tightly as she hides beneath the blankets. "Don't worry, young miss. I will protect you," I say, trying to reassure her. "Thank you, Daddy," she says without thinking, before turning bright red with embarrassment. I mean chicken. I mean Boo," she blurts out, trying to keep her composure, before once again hiding under the blankets. "You're welcome," I say, smiling from ear to ear. As we get closer to the girl's new home, I hear movement behind me. as the little girl climbs beside me, a nervous kind of movement, as if she was forcing herself to do so. I turned to face her, and I'm met with a tight hug. Do I have to go, Boo? She says, with a sad, soft voice, her hands trembling. I thought this is what you wanted, to go be with your family, I say as the sun is slowly replaced by the moon. Can't you be my family? I don't know Daddy's family. And what if they're mean? She argues as she tugs on my suit in frustration. Now we both know the only reason I can be around you is because of this suit, I say, trying to reason with her. Then don't take your suit off and run away with me, she says, smiling. I say, pulling over by a lake and untying the horse from the harness to let it drink and graze. The little girl doesn't leave the cart, but cross her arms, clearly unhappy with my answer. It wasn't until I made her a small tent out of the blankets and cook her up a hot meal until she finally conceded and joined me by the fire. Tucking her into bed, I could finally remove my heavy suit, have supper, and go to bed myself in the back of the cart with the remaining blankets. I awake to a scream and a cloaked figure dragging me out of the cart. The flagellants had found us. As I hit the ground, I watch as one of the men struggle as he tries to force little Miss out of her tent. With a rush of adrenaline filling my body, I grab my cane and begin to fend them off, managing to take a few out before finally being overwhelmed. Little Miss sees me, knocked down and pinned by the flagellants, and lets out a massive scream, sending a shock wave of energy that consumes everything around her. As I crawl from under the man who mostly shielded me from the blast, I watch in horror as they all quickly go through the plague stages before finally falling dead. I'm left in shock, unable to comprehend what just happened. I look towards little Miss, who's looking at the dead, speechless. I push the last man off me before standing to my feet and begin to walk towards her to comfort her, but she stops me by raising her hand. She points to my neck as tears stream down her face. I follow her gaze and touch my neck, feeling a large boil. I'm so sorry, Daddy. As she falls to her knees sobbing, I walk over and hold her in my arms. Her sobbing slows as she holds me tightly. You're so much warmer without your suit, she says as I pick her up and put her on the cart next to her teddy. I return the horse to the cart, who had fled during the fight with the flagellants, before picking up the reins one last time. As we ride up to her new home, her family recognizes her from a painting little Miss's father had sent before setting sail. Although they decided to take us in, only little Miss lives to tell our tale. As I lay on my deathbed, I mutter my last words. I love you, my daughter.